Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakaha Kwadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word and truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson. And I'll be reading from an article on thehill.com titled, Why Tens of Millions of Americans Now Believe the End is Near. And hey, as we get closer and closer to the end, and these prophecies speak louder and louder, and more people are gonna, wake up to the fact that this American dream they've been living is really just that, a dream, and it's about to quickly become a nightmare. And also, it's gonna be seen at the end of the day who were, the men of the Lord, the prophets, and as it stands right now, the spirit is clearly. The spirit of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is clearly resting on GMS, a Great Millstone, from our apostles and elders all the way down to the youngest man in sincerity. But the article reads, America used to reserve doomsday talk for the guy who stored beans in their backyard and argued about the book of Revelation on AM radio. Now, according to a recent paper in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 1/3 of the country, which, if you're in the spirit, you should see how highly significant that is. 1/3 of the country quietly suspects that the end will arrive before they get the chance to draw down their 401k plans. And we know that, according to the scriptures, the 1/3 of the elect of the nation of Israel in America, your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And then, of course, the Israelite foreigners who, through the curses and the scattering amongst the heathens, have come to look like the heathens, are going to go through Jacob's trouble and, receive salvation, getting beamed up onto the chariots of the Lord, which people ignorantly refer to as so-called UFOs, while 2/3 of the Israelites in America, as well as the other heathen nations here, are going to be cut off by nuclear fire when nuclear missiles hit this place, at the end of World War III, which, before we keep going, this is Zechariah chapter 13, verses 8 to 9. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, and this land is speaking of America, saith Yahweh, 2 parts or 2/3 therein shall be cut off and die, from all the judgments and calamities of Jacob's trouble and ultimately the nuclear missiles. But the 1/3 shall be left therein, the faithful 1/3 of the elect who are spending this grace period, getting themselves right and getting in the good graces of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, so they can ultimately receive salvation. And I will bring the 3rd part through the fire, through Jacob's trouble, those nuclear missiles, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, which, the elect are doing right now, calling on the true names of the Heavenly Father and His Son, Yahweh, the Most High, and His Son, Yahweh Shai, whom the world ignorantly refers to as so-called Jesus. And as things get worse out here, you Israelites are going to truly see the importance of knowing the names of the Lord and calling on them. As it says in, I believe it's either Proverbs 18 or Proverbs 30, the name of the Lord is a strong and high tower. The righteous runneth into it. But for those of you out there, especially in those other camps, you leaders that don't push the name, and you're about to be seen as the false, prophets and shepherds and wolves in sheep's clothing that you've been, and to you Israelites that still follow after them, hey, more than likely you can count yourself as the 2/3 club, lest ye repent. And I will bring the 3rd part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, Yahweh is my power. So, hey, it's just articles like these, which, I got to give a shout out to the brother Kalaya, for putting this in our chat. But it's articles like these with little, spiritual, in the spirit references to things in the scriptures that let us know that our salvation is nearer than when we believed. Because, while it's talking about 1/3 of Americans, in this article, seeing that things are getting bad and they believe the end will happen in their lifetime, only the 1/3 of the elect of the nation of Israel truly understand that the end will be in our lifetime, which we believe that's this generation. And what? We see all the prophecies in the scriptures leading towards it taking place as we speak. Historically, apocalyptic thinking had a specific address. It lived in church basements, in prophecy charts that looked like a bad subway maps, in the vocabulary of preliminary dispensationalism, which just goes into evangelical Christian thought on the rapture and Jesus, as they call him, and his 1,000-year reign, which there is no rapture, and Yahushua will have his 1,000-year reign, which is just simply the first 1,000 years of the kingdom of heaven. And Satan, the spiritual demon Satan's not going to come afterwards and have his little season of rulership. That's already taken place right now with this physical counterpart on the earth, Esau Edom, the so-called white man ruling. And he's just about at the end of his rulership, which the end of his rulership marks the end of the age of the Gentiles, or the heathen Gentiles ruling before, the eternal kingdom of heaven under the children of Israel. As it says in 2nd Esdras chapter 6, for Esau is the end of the world, or simply an aeon, or age, in or period in history and time, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, the kingdom of heaven. A word almost designed to keep outsiders out. The end of the world was a conviction reserved for a certain kind of Christian, which the true Christians are the Israelites, who awaited it with a feeling somewhere between dread and satisfaction, which, I'll say this, the hopeful elect, which, Yahweh Ratazah, Yahweh Shai Ratazah, I'm ultimately of that elect number. Hey, we have, a sense of dread and satisfaction seeing that these prophecies are coming to pass, and everything we've been believing in, is coming to pass. And what the dread part comes in is where as it says, many are called but few are chosen. We'll only know if we're chosen once we're beaten up on those chariots. Hey, we pray to be called, but regardless, we know that our salvation is at hand, and the kingdom of heaven, where our nation will finally be at peace, is at hand as well. These were the kind of people for whom a catastrophe would finally settle an argument they've been having for decades. Everyone else just changes the channel and went back to refinancing their mortgages. Hey, let's get it real quick. And 2 Peter chapter 3, which reads, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, which, we can clearly see that's the case now, especially in America. This is a godless, and gutless society, where instead of people, living by morality or taking heed to the scriptures, they follow after their own lusts, following after that American dream. Verse 4, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation, as it said in that article. There were the kind of people for whom the catastrophe would finally settle an argument they had been having for decades. Everyone else just changed the channel and went back to refinancing their mortgages. Hey, there shall come scoffers in the last days, walking after their own lusts, saying, where is the promise of his coming? And we've heard about the second coming of Jesus since our grandparents. There's always been earthquakes and wars and, famines and pestilences. You're taking this too seriously from that fairy tale book. For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of the Most High, the heavens that were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. And that's talking about the first death during the days of Noah, which, Noah prophesied for 100 years while he built that ark. And what happened? You had scoffers back then as you have scoffers today, saying, oh, you're wasting your time. What are you doing? It's never going to rain. Because back then, a mist, which you can read about in Genesis, I believe chapter 2, a mist came up, like morning dew that watered the earth. Nobody had ever seen rain back then, so it was asinine to them to think water would fall from the sky. But then what happened? It started raining, and then the flood came, and Noah, his son, his wives, and their wives were the only souls that survived. Well, now we're coming into the times of the second death, where, just as back then, as you have now, people scoffing at the prophets. We're primarily speaking to our people, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And what do they say? Oh, America will never fall. Oh, nuclear missiles will never be shot. Well, but the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and the perdition or the destruction of ungodly men. And like I said at the beginning of the lesson, as we get closer and closer to the end of this thing and these prophecies speak louder and louder, as you're seeing with this article, 1/3 of Americans are seeing that there's something up, that they're really starting to consider that the end of the world is going to happen in their lifetime. That separation is gone when the U.S. and Israel chose to attack Iran and kill the country's supreme leader. The phrase World War III began trending on the phones of mechanics in Des Moines and software engineers in Austin. So what they're saying is what? From blue-collar jobs to white-collar jobs, from all different walks of life, as these prophecies speak louder, these people are getting that spiritual gut feeling that something's up. And then first and foremost, with the prophets out here prophesying this word, hey, we're putting that vibration out there of the end of this world or age of the heathens, chiefly of Esau. And everything that you're seeing in current events, we're perfectly lining it up with biblical prophecy, which brings me to Isaiah chapter 25, verse 7. And he will destroy in this mountain. And in the scriptures, mountains can represent governments. So like it mentioned land in Zephaniah 13, it says a mountain here, this mountain or this government of America. And he will destroy in this mountain, America, the face of the covering cast over all the people and the veil that is spread over all the nations. All this deception and witchcraft and propaganda the elites of Esau have used to keep you Americans in a stupor as what? Prices go up, talks of World War III and it hashtagging on social media take place. Crime increases, hatred out here increases, people getting desperate. They're starting to see through the illusion. They're starting to see that everything they've been told, for decades at this point, and everything they hear in the mainstream news, and especially from their politicians, which with Nero 47, DJ Donald Trump, he's constantly flip-flopping in the news. At one point, the war with Iran is over. We've completely destroyed them. But then at the other point, we're sending thousands of troops into the region. People are seeing through the lies, and they're looking for answers. Hence, why, growing numbers of Americans are questioning whether we're in the end or not. The researchers found that more than 100 million Americans expect the world to end in their lifetime. That is not some vague anxiety, but a concrete belief that colors how these people think about climate change, nuclear war, economic collapse, and artificial intelligence. That is your neighbor, your barista, your Uber driver, and the manager at work who just updated the remote work policy. That's pretty much it with this article. You get the point. But hey, this covering cast is being removed off of all the people. And also, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is getting ready to glorify his men who have been preaching this word. Which brings me to Zephaniah chapter 3. I'm going to read verses 19 to 20. Behold, at that time, I will undo all that afflict thee, which we're seeing right now. Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is breaking down Esau Edom's power and exposing him for the fraud that he's been, and breaking down his breaking down America at every level, economically, militarily, and morally. And I will save her that halteth, and gather her that was driven out. And I will get them praise and fame in every land where they have been put to shame. And it's beginning now with the men of the Lord preaching this word, and more and more people seeing that those guys on the street corners with those dresses on, everything they were saying was true. A couple of months ago, you had an Israelite walk up to, I believe it was the brothers up in the New York camp, and he said, yeah, I think he might have said he used to be a scoffer, or, he had heard, the message from the apostles and the brothers for years, but he finally said, look, hey, everything you guys said was the truth, because it's finally coming to pass. And best believe, Akim, that more people than you realize watch our lessons. I've noticed it, and other brothers have noticed it. You're starting to see more and more of these alternative media people, these truth tellers, you name it, start to use biblical terms. The men of the Lord have been using and having biblical talking points. Suddenly everybody's just a Bible expert. Why? Because, there's a lot of secret disciples out here. And as these words of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai get magnified more and more out here as prophecy comes to pass, his men are going to be magnified more and more. At that time will I bring you again, even in the time that I gather you. For I will make you a name and a praise among all the people of the earth, when I turn back your captivity before your eyes, saith Yahweh, which again is beginning now. The elect are waking up, and you've got the 1/3 in America waking up and coming back to their power. And with that taking place, that's synonymous with Esau losing his grip on power and being exposed. And then the ultimate praise and fame among the people of the earth is when the Israelites are back on top in the kingdom of heaven, being that perfection of beauty we were always meant to be. But I'm going to close it out in Isaiah chapter 24. I'm going to start at verse 7. The new wine mourneth, the vine languisheth, all the merry-hearted do sigh, which is what, we're seeing with that article. hundreds of millions of Americans believing that the end of the world is, going to take place in their lifetime due to factors such as climate change, economic collapse, nuclear war, or AI. And if people are thinking that, what does that mean? That, they're sighing out here. They're in a depressed state. They don't have the answers they're looking for to their questions, so they're scrambling everywhere to try to find it. The mirth of the tabrets ceaseth, the noise of them that rejoice endeth, the joy of the harp ceaseth. You got a lot of people out here that are cash strapped, working 2 to 3 jobs with nothing to show for it, can't take those vacations like they used to, can't buy the things that they want, just living paycheck to paycheck. And then what? You've got this looming energy crisis, energy lockdowns, fuel shortages, food shortages, etc., etc. They shall not drink wine with a song. Strong drink shall be bitter to them that drink it. People, drinking alcohol and doing drugs to drown out the misery of their situation. The city of confusion is broken down, which Babylon, which is one of the names for America in the scriptures, Babylon the Great. Babylon in the Hebrew is Babel, which means confusion by mixing. The city of confusion, the city of America, is broken down. Every house is shut up that no man may come in. And what have we been seeing over these last couple of months? Hundreds of thousands of workers being laid off from blue collar jobs to white collar jobs, businesses shutting their doors, moving to AI, the list goes on. And then with, I did a lesson, the other day on energy lockdowns 2.0. They're talking about with this looming energy crisis that we may have to do, energy lockdowns to where people got to stay in their houses, do remote work, and carpool or take public transportation. And it may even get to the point to where there are only going to be certain days where you can drive, and it's going to be based on, the numbers on your license plate. Every house is shut up that no man may come in. There is a crying for wine in the streets. All joy is darkened. The mirth of the land is gone. And that crying for wine is a crying for answers out here, which when we go back to that article, Slaki, I'm just looking for it. That separation is gone when the U.S. and Israel chose to attack Iran and kill that country's supreme leader. The phrase World War III began trending on the phones of mechanics in Des Moines, Iowa, and software engineers in Austin. This is not some vague anxiety. All the merry-hearted do sigh, but a concrete belief that colors how these people think about climate change, nuclear war, economic collapse, and artificial intelligence. That is your neighbor, your barista, your Uber driver, and the manager at work who just updated the remote work policy. There's a crying for wine in the streets. World War III trending, economic collapse, artificial intelligence, all these pressing matters, trending and people looking for answers. But the only answers you're going to find are from the men of the Lord. Again, chiefly of GMS or Great Millstone. And even then, only the elect, which 1/3 of the elect in America are going to be the ones to, truly get this word, understand the times they're living in, and rejoice because our salvation is nearer than when we believed. But that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere, Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can damn sure clearly see, we are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babol, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.